It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays and a couple of housekeeping things. One, we made our goal with Leanna Care sessions this week, and I'm very excited because it was looking like it wasn't going to happen until yesterday, and then a whole bunch of stuff came in. So I'm really grateful for that. That means the two people who were waiting on sessions, I can book them now for the month. That's the unfortunate thing about pay to play mental health stuff. When you need it, it's not there. Now, apparently, even people who can afford mental health services right now are not able to get in to see their therapist. They're getting in once a month or only twice a month when they need more than that. And that's why I'm a big believer in peer counseling services and what we're doing with It's Not Therapy and Leanna Cares. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. A lot of patrons also chip in via coffee, which I greatly appreciate. A lot of Leanna Cares clients buy additional sessions for other people because they know it works. So that's really awesome. Regarding It's Not Therapy, you're not going to want to miss tomorrow's show. It was preempted for a Raptors game last week, but this week I can finally say who it is. Paul Sung-Hung Lee from Kim's Convenience and The Mandalorian is coming on It's Not Therapy to talk about rejection and dealing with rejection. Paul was very generous with his time, talked to me for over a half an hour. So if you listen to the podcast version, link in the description box, I put the whole thing in. I had to cut it down for the radio show and bleep out some of the swears. But I put the whole thing up because he said a lot of things that were very interesting about the industry, as well as the topic at hand. And I'm like, this needs to go somewhere. So the podcast version of It's Not Therapy is like an hour this week instead of the 48 minutes that I have to squish in for radio. But getting on to the topic at hand, I want to talk about resolving conflicts because obviously there's a lot of it right now for understandable reasons. People are really on edge, and because I am ideally a collaborative conflict resolver, through the conflicts I've been having lately, I've been learning some stuff I wasn't aware about, just how deep the shit is going lately. And part of the reason I've been doing a lot more mental health stuff is that, you guys can watch my Twitch streams to get my opinions on video games. I like talking about video games, but right now I feel like the more important stuff is getting people grounded and stabilized and, people first. And that's basically how conflict resolution models work. There's something called the Thomas-Killman conflict model that I want to touch on briefly. Just not to get too bogged down in the weeds about it, just to give you sort of a primer about what I'm going to talk about here. I know I don't do graphics very often on this, but when I do, they're not great because this is just a web image. Let me see if I can make this a bit bigger. That's a bit better. Okay, here we go. It's not there. It's not centered. It's still not centered, but here we go. So this is the basic options for conflict resolution. You will notice that there is a y-axis of assertiveness from high to low, and then an x-axis of cooperativeness from high to low or low to high, whichever way you want to go. And it's a 5-quadrant grid. It can't be 5 quadrants, 5 areas. Quadrants is 4. But so low cooperativeness, low assertiveness is avoidance. That happens a lot. And if you're wondering what the you them thing is, green means win, reddish salmon pink means loss. So with avoiding, they lose, you lose. That's really important to remember, that if you avoid conflict, both sides lose. But if you add assertiveness without cooperativeness, which you see a lot because we focus on assertiveness in terms of what we kind of reward, we reward assertiveness way more than cooperativeness, and you get competition. You win, they lose. Now, that may sound good, but it doesn't make you many friends in the long term. But you notice how it says, focus on getting your perspective accepted. Now, I disagree with this thing, because if the other person feel like they're losing, they're not going to accept your perspective. That's the problem with being a competitive conflict type, is you may think you win, but it's short term. Then we get into more cooperativeness, and again, we'll start low to high. Low assertiveness, high cooperativeness, accommodating. Now, to me, accommodating is a form of avoiding, right? Because you lose, they win. That leads to resentment. I'm not a fan of accommodating. And again, sometimes short term, all right, fine, you win, backing off. It's not actually calling a truce, though. You've got to be really careful when you accommodate, because you are training people how to treat you. And if you let someone get away with shit once, you let someone walk on you once, be prepared, they're going to do it again. Now we get into the two versions of conflict resolution that are actually functional long term. Now, we all know about compromising, right? You give some to get some. And people don't like the idea of compromise because it sounds like you are compromised. But compromise can be really, really useful, because sometimes you have to decide what's more important, the relationship or the topic, the idea. And if the relationship is more important to you than the topic, then compromising on the topic is the smart thing to do, right? The topic's not that important. The idea is to reassert the relationship. Cool. Now, that doesn't mean you give all the way on the topic, but you give some. It's not that important, right? And it astounds me how many people I've watched potentially blow up years long. Online friendships are still friendships, but I'm watching people potentially throw away years long friendships over video games, TV shows, and movies. And this is insane to me. But that speaks to something deeper here. And I don't think it's all just about underlying issues. I think it actually is communication skills regarding that they don't actually know how to compromise in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're accommodating. More on that in a bit. Let's get to collaborating, because this is what I like to do. All right. Come together to develop a mutually beneficial solution. This is where I like to get, which is why I spend so much fucking time on She-Hulk, and I didn't make it regarding She-Hulk. And in some cases I did. Notice it's green. But with some people, I was actually managed to get past the conflict, or we sort of understood each other on on the whole thing and learn something and move forward together. But most of the time I just had to compromise and go, all right, nobody's going to meet me halfway here in so many cases. So whatevs. And, you know, people have to meet you halfway to even get compromise. But collaborating isn't just meeting someone halfway. It's meeting someone halfway and moving forward together. And that means everybody wins. And I like everybody wins conflict. I like having those conflicts. In small groups or one-on-one, I have really good success with collaborative conflict. But you try to do that at scale, and you get a large enough group of people who do not have the skills, and you can't do it. The best you can get is a compromise, and then nobody feels really good about it. And part of it is I don't think that people understand how collaborative conflict works. And one of the things in the Paul Lee interview for It's Not Therapy was the fact that when you're in media, when you're doing, especially acting, which is, you know, an inherently vulnerable thing, conflicts happen, and learning how to collaborate within the conflict. And I'm just trying to fix my camera for my reference here, so bear with me. It's not freaking working. All right, thanks, OBS. But it is possible to start with a conflict and then collaborate. Now, you certainly can't get that if you avoid conflict. And the longer you avoid a conflict, the harder it's going to be to get a collaborative result. Because, and this may seem self-explanatory once it's explained, but people are so avoidant that they don't think it through. But things feel like a win-win when the conflict is smaller. When someone's not told something until they might have done things unintentionally and now it can't be fixed, they're not going to feel like collaboration is possible because they feel like they've been hung out to dry. The other thing about collaborative conflict is it's best when it's most likely to happen when both people are decent enough listeners and in a place to listen, that they're not reactive, and therefore they can take subtle comments instead of having to hit them with a brick. You guys may notice I have no problem dishing out the proverbial bricks when I need to. I prefer not to do it. Now, I understand sometimes you have to. And this is when, you know, dealing with people who are neurodivergent, dealing with people who are on, you know, the autism, ADHD, OCD, so on and so forth spectrums. Sometimes you do have to be very blunt so they understand it, but you have to use, going back to the brick metaphor, you have to use the smallest, you know, LARP nerfed brick you possibly can. And the problem is that when something has been building for a while and you're not saying something because you don't want to make trouble, it builds and builds and builds on both ends. And then it's these great big, like Mjolnir style bricks right? Bashing at each other instead of going, okay, hold up. Look, I don't think you have any ill intent here, but this is the way it's hitting. And that this is the part where collaboration is called collaboration for a reason. You really can't get a collaboration unless both sides agree to collaborate. And this is the part that becomes tough. Because again, it's a personality thing. It's a skill thing. It's a self-esteem thing. It's also a mental health thing. Because someone can have normally quite an agreeable personality. The skills to resolve conflict in terms of listening and collaborating. And normally they've got, enough self-esteem that it's like, all right, that stung, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to process. I'm not going to react right away. But when somebody's depressed or, having an attack of anxiety or going through a trauma trigger, that's just not possible in that moment. And this is where social media radically complicates collaborating. And it's something I've been talking to a lot of people about lately, and there's no surefire solution to it. That whenever there's humans, there's no surefire solution to these things. But you can do better and you can do not as good, right? Collaborative people recognize when it's time to not make public what is going on, even in subtweets, right? Because if you're digging at someone, you're inflaming, right? If you've agreed to let something cool down and you're posting stuff that is still pretty contentious, because then it's that's where it falls into the competitive aspect instead of collaborating aspect. And so, yeah. And that's the thing, is that consider like collaboration a landing zone, an LZ, right? And if you miss the LZ, you land in competing, compromising, or accommodating, But hey, that all of those, quite frankly, are better than avoiding, so still worth the try. And someone may say, no, it's not better than avoiding because you're losing friends, potentially, because of that decision I said you have to make going into a conflict. What's more important here, the friendship or the issue? And the truth is that if you don't think you can talk to somebody about things and resolve conflicts, are they really your friend? And is it a healthy friendship? And one of the hardest things I ever had to learn is the answer for me is no. I'm one of those people who I need deep connections with people. I talk about it all the time. I need to be able to trust somebody with my back turned and my eyes closed. And I know that's not going to be everyone. But I do try to have the small fights early, because if somebody can't handle it, especially when it's a creative project, like, when it's a brand thing, something like It's Not Therapy or Song of Sparkle Muffin, especially the game, because it is such a long endeavor. People are putting so much time and effort and like blood, sweat, passion, and tears into it, that you get one person who is in it for themselves instead of the collective goal, instead of the collaboration. And it's not going to work. That's just untenable. People are going the extra mile way too much. No, you cannot play two unless you can play well with others. And so it's important to have those fights early. And yeah, some people, I've given them a try and they haven't worked out. And that does happen, especially on a lengthy project. And sometimes it's no one's fault. Sometimes, like I said, it's life stuff. And so you can recognize that someone is not a collaborator and still think that they're a good person. And this camera angle is driving me crazy. So, but you can still think someone is a good person, but not right for a particular project. Other times you realize by trying to collaborate with someone, you realize they are not a good person. And that is where that is the issue more important to you, or is the person more important to you come in. And this is a core values thing. There are some core values that are non-negotiable. A lot of core values are non-negotiable. You may not share a core value with someone, but you do have to respect it, right? Same way you don't have to like someone's boundaries, but you do have to respect them. And boundaries are very important to collaboration. So I will touch on that. But I want to talk on the core values element, because core values determine your boundaries, right? And it's Trans Awareness Week. So this is really front of mind, because you guys know this is a trans-friendly channel. And I do believe that, I hate the term allyship, but being I have trans friends that I care about a lot. And I don't feel like I'm being a good friend to just sit and see something I think is transphobic and say nothing. And, I don't drop the term transphobia lightly. I don't drop any phobia lightly, because it's going to get people upset that words like that create a competitive conflict. With the GCs, the gender criticals, I don't like that term because it's a dog whistle euphemism for transphobes. They're not just asking questions. They're openly trying to oppress a group of people who is very small and therefore relatively easy to pick on. And that fucking offends me. And it's that you're picking on this group because they are small and because they're not understood. And so it's easy. It brings out the bully in people. And obviously, being Jewish and seeing what goes on with that, I relate to that a lot. So if somebody's gonna be a transphobe, that's a deal breaker. And there's a difference between somebody who goes, I just don't get this yet. I'm trying, but it's not clicking. That's one thing. I went through this with marriage equality in the 90s. Some things take time, but there's the collaboration. They're willing to put in the effort. Okay, we're working on this together. We are developing a mutually beneficial solution here. I am all about that. But the minute someone is knowingly continuing to act or speak in a way that makes another person feel demeaned or disrespected, that is competitive. That is not collaborative. You're turning that into it's you or me thing. And no, not on my projects. And that goes for anything, because the truth is, you can't solve these problems with anti-discrimination training, because fun fact, people are individuals. And so one person from an identifiable group is not going to have the same relationship with their identity as somebody else from another identifiable group. What that identity piece means to them is not the same. And so one thing that one person finds very supportive, another person is going to be bothered by. And so you can't just take a one-size-fits-all course and solve the problem. You actually have to talk to each other. And yeah, it can get a little tiring to remember everyone's sensitivities. And again, that's where collaboration instead of compromising comes in. That compromising is just, all right, I have to use all these stupid words that I don't understand, but whatever, I'll take the hit, go along to get along. Whereas collaborating is actually understanding why it bothers the other person, because that makes it easy to remember not to do it, right? But at the same time, having it validated that you don't mean any harm by the term, because different terms mean different things to different people. And, I talked on a podcast about the term ignorant and how it's used differently. Where I came up, ignorant was what you said when you deliberately weren't calling someone stupid. In other places, it's synonymous for stupid, or ignorant means bigoted. And no, that's not my usage of the word. My usage of the word is you're not stupid and you're not mean. You just don't get this yet. But some people get very offended by the term ignorant. People are people. Fair. Understand why. Collaborate. Right? And this is where we get to boundaries, because, it goes the same. I have LGBTQ plus people of color of various religions and no religion that work for me and with me. And anybody who comes in and doesn't respect their boundaries is not going to work out. Because I think that what I do benefits from people who come at things from very different perspectives, who can learn from each other, who can collaborate. And you get one person who competes instead of collaborates, and all that goes, right? Because it becomes a competitive environment. If you've got one person in there to compete, people either have to compromise, accommodate, avoid, or compete with them. You can't have collaboration unless everyone is there to collaborate. So those people got to go. And that's where boundaries come in, because people aren't mind readers. People are not mind readers. And so many people have been trained, one, to mind read, to anticipate what that you think someone wants instead of asking them, which is always a bad idea. Sometimes you have to do it, but it's always a high risk strategy. So boundaries are really important, right? And one is, when you notice somebody's getting upset, slow down. I don't know why that is so hard for so many people. I test it. I come on this channel and go, this one stung, guys. This one really stung. And I watch the people who may have been coming at me really hard, but they back off because they respect that that's not what they were going for. And the other people who just keep hammering. Guess what happens to the people who just keep hammering? Back of the line. They don't get their comment read. They don't get attention. They might get banned if they go after another commenter. Because again, another boundary. Don't attack other people in the comment section. I want collaborative comments. I want people who may disagree, but they're trying to learn from each other, not people trying to score points. Take that bullshit somewhere else. There are plenty of YouTube channels, go shitpost somewhere else. But some people, and it's training, I get it. Some people have been raised in the only the strong survive bullshit. The only conflict strategies they have been given are one person wins, one person loses, or just avoid completely, because there's never a win-win and compromise feels icky. And until you've experienced a collaborative conflict, it's hard to picture it, right? And so many people have suboptimal conflict styles. There's a ton of that in gaming. A ton of that. Ton in indie games. It's frankly why I decided to make my own game, as stressful as it is because I got tired of being blamed for other people's avoidance. Because I'd go, okay, healthy conflict time. Here's the deal. And you're not a team player. There is nothing more team player than solving problems. And I just got so sick because I was willing to have the collaborative conflicts and everybody else wanted to avoid or worse, friggin' snipe, which is a form of competitive conflict, right? You spread rumors about a person to triangulate and knock them down. So they lose and you win. But I got sick of it. I just got sick of it. The projects weren't benefiting. It was wasting money because there were all these stupid whisper campaigns and factional bullshit. And there was just a deficit in leadership that vacuums get filled, vacuums happen, decisions have to get made. Somebody got upset and it was the blame game instead of collaborating. And you have to collaborate to make a game. You have to. You keep hearing the term collaboration in game dev, but a lot of people I don't think truly internalize what that means. And it comes down to boundaries. If you seem to be upsetting somebody, stop, find out why. Solving the problem can wait a couple minutes. It doesn't matter how right you are because one, if the person's getting upset and you didn't expect them to get upset, there's a missing piece of information there, right? Like stop, look and listen, right? Or as I say, listen twice before you talk once. You lose nothing by finding out why somebody's upset before proceeding. And in the case of work, when it is a work project, there has to be the assumption that ultimately you have to solve the work-related problem. It isn't friends or work. It's you came into this as friends who work together. The agreement was there that certain problems have got to get solved. And, the way I do it is, especially if it's not my call, I'll tell people, I think this is a bad idea and this is why. And the thing people misunderstand about me is I'm doing that so I'm being a good friend as well as a good employee. They have the information. If it's their call and they decide to go against what I'm saying, I'll back them. And, and with exceptions, if something is really bigoted, I'm not, obviously, I'm not going to have my name on that. But if it's just a question of not the way I would do it, I advise they go their ways. They have their reasons. I get it. I will back them, even though I don't agree with it. And that's the part people don't get. That, yes, there are a lot of people that do work that way, and it's the best way. I'll have my fight with you in private, but in public, unless you force me to have the fight in public. But in public, if I don't think you're shooting yourself in the foot, I'll back you. Because it's just different. And if it's somebody else's decision to make and they fuck up, well, that's on them, not me. Right? And they could be right. They could see something I don't. And I'll learn from that if it does work out, But again, the conflict made the brain remember it as relevant, and that's the collaboration. The collaboration there is, this is your call. I'm going to tell you what I think, but ultimately it is your call. This is not a democracy. Chain of command. Okay, it's on you. Let's go. And, it's important in those cases that if you have a respectful relationship and someone does make the wrong call, you don't, I told you so, unless, you think they need to hear it. Most of the time they don't. They know you told them. They didn't listen. A good leader will admit that. But again, boundaries, right? When you're having that conflict, there are just some places you don't go. You don't, as a rule, accuse people of ill intent when everyone is just trying to solve the problem, right? And that's why that's another reason why you can't have somebody you think has bigotries, relevant bigotries in a team, uh, where you have to have that trust. Because if somebody thinks that someone is behaving differently towards them because of their, you know, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, language, so on and so forth, you're not going to be able to collaborate because there's not trust. And everybody has their things. Everybody has their things they're not cool with. I know there are certain things that I am just a little more hesitant regarding than others, but I'm aware of that so that I don't jump the gun on people that way. And, you know, so I managed to have a lot of people I'm friendly with whose politics are more conservative than mine. And it works out because I don't assume everything is some conservative plot just because of the way somebody identifies. There are some good elements to traditional conservatism. Yeah, I said it. And I mean, I'm so liberal, my hair is red. That's a Canadian thing. I know the GOP is red in the US. It's weird up here. Our conservatives are blue, our liberals are red. It's weird. But again, people are gonna have lines that you don't cross. And the minute someone sets a boundary and you cross it, you can't collaborate anymore. And it doesn't matter why you crossed the line. You crossed the line. You made it competitive. You made it you versus them in that moment by crossing that line. Crossing the line meant you can't both win. Because now it becomes a competition. Now it becomes a tug of war. Person has to enforce their boundary. And that you have to accommodate boundaries. You have to back off. You know, it doesn't matter how right you think you are. You're wrong in continuing to do something someone told you not to do that was reasonable. And by reasonable, I mean, don't use that term. Okay, what term should I use? They give you an alternative term, use it. Not, that's stupid, I'm not going to use that term. I see so many people go, I'm going to keep using this term you find offensive until I get a better term. That's competitive. You're setting up a paradigm that someone's going to go, fine, fuck you. Is the friendship worth that to you? Is the working relationship worth that to you? Often the time, if you stop and calm down, no, it's not. It's a word. And I mean, that's another big thing. It's a word with me. There's always another word you can use. Always. And often these conflicts just come down to people not collaborating with people regarding language. I don't like that term. Don't use it. People just get combative and reactive and go, make me. That, I'm sorry, is not an adult response. If somebody's being ridiculous, like, oh, they change terms every few weeks and people can't keep up, that's not reasonable, right? Most people don't do that. And if somebody does do that, then again, they're not your friend. It's not worth, and if it's at work, document that, point out that, look, I accommodated. They're not collaborating. They're just making me chase them. Any reasonable manager is going to go, yeah, you can't do that. Set something, pick something, stick with it. But that goes both ways. Don't needle people and don't make people chase you. That's pretty much the basics of boundaries. If you're doing something that bothers somebody and you want a good result to something, stop doing it. Find another way. That's the only way you can get collaboration. And this video went on really, really long, so I'm going to wrap it now. Hope you find it helpful. I almost put up the wrong thing. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching and be well.